Welcome back to our series, The Power of Ideas. This is episode 2. Today we will delve into one of the most defining moments of Napoleon's rise to power, the coup of Brumaire in 1799. After years of turmoil and the revolutionary chaos, Napoleon seized the opportunity to restore order. But as we'll see, his approach wasn't about ideology or consistency. It was about pragmatism and action. We explore how Napoleon, through military might and political maneuvering, took control of France and set the stage for his reign. For years, it had been safer to speak critically of the revolution in France, especially after the Reign of Terror. In January 1797, while in Italy, Napoleon promised the Cispadane Congress that the French had come to bring liberty, but without the crimes and violence of the revolution. To clarify, does this mean the revolution was wrong? Well, not at all. Napoleon's approach to the revolution is complex and difficult to reconcile because he wasn't concerned with consistency in his public statements or a deep philosophical worldview. Unlike other leaders, he didn't prioritize sticking to fixed principles. Instead, Napoleon was pragmatic, focused on practical outcomes. He was willing to adjust his stance and beliefs when it served his political goals or helped him maintain power. For him, flexibility and decisive action were more important than ideological consistency. Now, let me share an interesting episode. Walking in Ermenonville, where Rousseau is buried, Napoleon reflected on the revolutionary thinker. Rousseau, a key figure in inspiring the revolution, was on his mind. And Napoleon casually said, It would have been better for the tranquility of France if he had never existed. He is the one who prepared the French Revolution. At the time, Napoleon was still first consul, not yet emperor. Those with him laughed, surprised by his harsh words about the revolution. Napoleon then added, "Perhaps the future will tell if, for the tranquility of the world, it would have been better if neither Rousseau nor I had ever existed." This wasn't just a boast, it was a moment of clarity. Napoleon spoke his mind, and while politicians often do that, this statement reveals the contradiction at the heart of his role. He presented himself as the man who would bring peace, tranquility, and security to France. But as a military leader, his fame and glory were built on actually war. Napoleon presents himself as the pacifier, the one who will end the divisions and quarrels that have plagued France. Under his regime, there are no more factions. In 1800, his brother Luciano, who will later be sidelined by Napoleon, serves as the Minister of the Interior. But at this point, right after the coup, Luciano still holds an important position. In a speech that year, Luciano declares, "The meaning of the 18th of Brumaire is clear. The divisions are gone, factionalism has disappeared, and what is truly French has emerged. Anyone who loves the glory of the homeland is welcomed and protected." Napoleon, of course, embodies that glory. He has brought France immortal glory through his victories on the battlefield. But this glory is not just his, it belongs to the entire nation. Napoleon is a key part of this legend, but the glory of France, as he sees it, is shared by all. Even Talleyrand, one of the most astute politicians of the time, recognizes this. When Napoleon returned from Italy in 1797, he wasn't yet the emperor, but already was a celebrated military leader. Talleyrand remarked, "All the French have won with Bonaparte. His glory is the property of all." This glory, of course, was won during the Revolutionary Wars initiated by Robespierre to expand the revolution. These wars were very different from the early years of the revolution when France was invaded by foreign armies aiming to restore the monarchy. Napoleon's military career was built on wars of expansion, aimed at spreading the ideas of the revolution, particularly the vision of revolution. As the leader of the Italian army, he became the embodiment of these revolutionary wars. But after securing these victories, Napoleon made a promise to the French people. He would bring an end to the constant warfare. However, the reality was that his regime would always be rooted in the military. Napoleon's power was fundamentally supported by the army, and this was something he repeatedly emphasized. One of Napoleon's key phrases was, "It is the soldiers who found republics, and it is the soldiers who preserves them," a sentiment he expressed to the Cisalpine Republic, that was in Italy, urging them to arm themselves. Another famous quote of his, "The revolution is an idea that has found bayonets," and he underscores the military nature of the revolution he championed. For Napoleon, the revolution wasn't just an abstract idea, it was something that had to be enforced through military force. The coup of Brumaire of 1799 was a military takeover, not only because grenadiers physically removed deputies from the hall, but because it was driven by a military class that could no longer tolerate being at the mercy of politicians. After years of answering to the revolutionary government, which had seen generals sent to the guillotine during the Reign of Terror for failures, the military had reached its breaking point. Napoleon's letters to the Italian campaign provide a clear window into his mindset. In one letter, he wrote, "The time when vile lawyers and miserable gossips had soldiers guillotined is over. And if you force them, the soldiers of Italy will march to Paris with their general." This statement reveals Napoleon's deep frustration with the political class and his belief that the military should no longer be subjected to the whims of politicians. It was a declaration that the military, under his leadership would no longer be subordinate. It would be the driving force in shaping France's future. Napoleon's march on Paris didn't require him to bring his Italian army to the capital, but in a sense, the coup of Brumaire in 1799 served as his march on Paris. This moment is often compared to another famous march, Mussolini's march on Rome, later in the 20th century. For Napoleon, however, the real comparison was to Julius Caesar, who famously crossed the Rubicon to overthrow a corrupt political system and seize power in Rome. Throughout his life, Napoleon saw himself as a modern-day Caesar. In his memoirs, written years after his fall from power, Napoleon reflects on his rise to the top. He doesn't even have to have learned much from his eventual downfall, but what he does remember is how, like Caesar's, he took power in France. He describes his coup as a sublime enterprise. Napoleon compares himself to Caesar, noting that Caesar, like him, was at the head of a great army and already a key political figure in Rome. He also draws a parallel to Alexander the Great, another king's son, but it's Caesar who is his primary model. In the Memorial of St. Helena, Napoleon recalls the audacity of his rise. "That a simple citizen, whose name 3 months earlier was unknown to everyone, and who had no other allies than some victories, his fame, and the consciousness of his genius, would dare to plan to take on the destinies of 30 million men, to save them from the disasters of discord, to take the helm of the state, and all of this without shedding a drop of blood, without controversy, was a gigantic and sublime enterprise for which one would vainly search for a comparison in human chronicles." For Napoleon, his coup wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a monumental act that was unmatched in history. On St. Helena, Napoleon recalls his coup as a gigantic and sublime enterprise. Well, in his eyes, he became the prototype of all coup makers, someone who seized power with the full support of the army, uh, though the general population remained largely indifferent. Napoleon's ascent to power was marked by contradictions. He promised peace, yet was a man of war. He distanced himself from the revolution, but his power was built on the ideals of the revolution. His flexibility and pragmatism allowed him to navigate the turbulent political landscape, but at what cost? As we move into the next episode, we will explore how these contradictions did not go unnoticed. There will be some critics, like Madame de Stael, who saw through the veneer of his promises, and they will challenge the very foundations of his rule. Well, thank you very much for following up with episode 2. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I'll see to address them. And once again, it has been a pleasure. I'll see you next time to episode 3. Bye.